Howdy, howdy, Devil here, and welcome to another video about the value of chevrons. I'll put this in my value of chevrons series, and this video is it actually is going to show a couple very interesting things. Something that I don't know if it's an exploit or not. You'll have to decide for yourself, but it is definitely a good way to get free stats. And I also, in this set of testing, learned something I had talked about a very long time ago, 3 years ago actually, almost. I did some testing, and I'll go over that in terms of chevrons and experience and how they affect a battle. And I'll go over a bit of a new bit of information I've added to my analysis spreadsheet, which is I have put a calculation for a standard deviation on the gold differential. I did have a request in a comment looking for sort of the 95% confidence level, or sort of that sort of statistical data in terms of my analysis. And a lot of statistical data comes down to really looking at the standard deviation. That gives you a lot of information, and it's a quick hop, skip, and a jump to a lot of other bits of information if you have the standard deviation. I know that I work with standard deviation a lot in my career, so I kind of do like it, and I have actually put it in there a few times in a few videos. But anyways, standard deviation is going to be in there, and I'll show you how it goes out. And I will go over the set of testing, the sort of the very unique and interesting way to get free stats. And I'll explain it to you when I get there, and sort of what the testing revealed. Now, I'll go over the spreadsheet real quick, and let me see. This is a graph sort of that I made. I made a graph like this 3 years ago when I did some analysis on your win percentage versus chevrons, and how when two units interact, this is sort of what you would expect from a sort of a theoretical perspective, meaning that your win percentage is here if your unit's in the blue. As you add chevrons and stat points, you will go from always losing to always winning at some point. And their curves are going to cross with the unit you're fighting. Will go from always winning, you're going to start losing some. Right where they meet is you're going to be about losing and winning 50% of the time, and then they're going to go to always losing. And in the original analysis, this gap, sort of this area where you cross over, is about 10 stat points. And that's one of the points that I made in that original video about chevrons, is your experience and your stat points can be very powerful in the right situation, because you can take a unit in a matchup that's going to generally lose and make it generally win, and that's a very big differential in gold. So what I did was I took a unit of dwarf warriors and I fought against Saurus warriors, and then I added one chevron, looked at the cost, fought again, added a chevron, looked at the cost, fought again. Now I did do fight against some longbeards, because you get your dwarf warriors up here. This is just for my own curiosity. Your dwarf warriors at 9 chevrons are 677 gold, and they actually have about an extra 2 stat points on melee attack and melee defense over longbeards. I wanted to see how base longbeard would do up against that. And the thing that I remember in my original video where I talked about this effect, I said, well, the data that I showed looked sort of like this, but not precisely. And I said, well, maybe if I did 20 tests, it would look a lot better. So in this case, I actually did 20 tests of each fight. So, I'll just show you, for example, we'll decrease the rank, and I'll just show you exactly how I do the testing. I always show the tests so that they can be repeated. It's important to me that even though the testing is not perfect, it's just one way of testing, and the data that I get is not perfect. It's just a bit of data, that the tests that I do are repeatable, so that they can be repeated in the future or in another way to show a different set of data, so that, as I look at my old tests, I know this is how I tested, and I can be pretty confident that the testing will be the same. So when I go in, I do use 2 mods. Pick any general is 1 mod, and unit testing fields, and I have this little UT fields 100 by 100. It makes the testing pretty quick. I always set the opposition as the attacker, me as the defender. Just grab, toggle guard mode off, and let the fight go. Double click, and this hit double fast forward. Now when they contact is about 5950, so I'll take their starting when they start to lose hit points, and when one of the units has leadership goes below 0, and that's when I'll stop the fight, and I'll look at their starting hit points and end hit points, and that's going to give me sort of the data points that I need. So you can see the Saurus Warriors. I just picked the Saurus Warriors because they were in a good position, and I'll explain that a little more when I get to the end, because they sort of get up to when the Dwarf Warriors are maximum statted, they can be competitive with the Saurus Warriors, or just about competitive. So I wanted that. So I you know, the Saurus Warriors are beat the crap out of them in the sort of that range, but once we get up to 9 chevrons, it's obviously a lot closer. So I'll go over the spreadsheet and go over the data. Now, the first set of 20 tests I did was with the Longbeards, and this little 1100 is what I'll talk about that in a little bit later, but they cost 650. The Saurus costs 750. The battle started at 5950, ended at 5431, taking 319 seconds. And the Longbeards finished with 638, started with 6450, Saurus 1968 to 7650. So we get a look at their DPS, or damage per second, for both the units to the other, 17.8 versus 18.2. And we can look at the gold differential. Now, this gold differential is a simple calculation based on the ratio of the starting to finishing hit points of both units multiplied through by their original cost, and looking at the differential. And then this corrected value down here is sort of, in this fight, the Longbeards, what is the base Longbeard worth compared to the Saurus Warrior, to show, is this a favorable matchup for me or not? And the answer in this case is no. You know, we're losing for an average of 16 gold in that fight, so it's not a bad matchup, it's just not favorable. Then I added the standard deviation, and of course I have the date that I did the testing, but I added the standard deviation here, which is 84.9, and that's the standard deviation of the gold differential, so it can tell you how swingy the results are. And one of the things that I would say that I would expect from this is, as you get closer to that 50% number, your standard deviation is going to go up. So it's going to get you're going to have a lot more variance in your results, and the results should be a lot more stable at the bottom. Now, I've got some graphs at the bottom I'm going to go over, but you know, basically, this here, the Dwarf Warriors, that's with 0 chevrons, and so 0 extra stat points, and this 1100 is how much experience they need to get to the next chevron. So this is where I learned something I'd never known before, and that is that there is a weird level, and that is at every single unit in the game, regardless of whether they're a clan rat or a dwarf warrior or a chosen. You need 1100 experience to get from 0 chevrons to 1 chevrons during a battle. But for some weird reason, if you start with 1 chevron, you only need 600 to get to the next level. Very, very strange. And this is, I mean, if you're not, and even though it takes the same for every unit, like 1100 experience to get to the first chevron, no matter which unit in the game it is, when you attack units, higher ranked units give you more experience. So that if you wanted to get free stats, you would actually give all of your units 1 chevron to start, and you get free stats really, really fast. Now I'm going to go over the rest of this, but I just want to show you guys really quick this effect because I think it's important. Now, and I'll show you just with some hammers because it's really quick. So if I take my hammers and I go up against the lizardmen, let's say, yeah, we'll just go up against these lizardmen. I'll show you. They're just starting with no chevrons at all, and I'll show you where this experience is. Okay, so it's right here, the XP. If you click on that, it says unit experience required for next rank 1100. It's the same for every unit, no matter what. So we start that fight, and there's a little effect. Once you kill the leader, you get a big bonus in your stats. That's not actually normal, but you can see, okay, we killed their leader, and we're getting, our stats are going up, you know, relatively quickly as we sort of kill these Saurus warriors, and you know, we still haven't gotten a chevron. We're beating them up, but it looks like we're going to get it. We're like 170 left here. Very, very close to being able to get that first chevron. Are we going to get it? We got it. We just got it just before we sent them routing. You can see right at 58:15. So if we end that battle, so I'm going to end the battle. I'll give them one chevron now, and you'll see you go to that second level incredibly fast. Now, I know you get the bonus from killing their leader, which isn't quite normal, but this is an important effect because, you know, essentially you're getting a 2-for-1 and almost a 3-for-1 because the next level, so to get to, when you have 2 chevrons, to get to 3, it's only 800. So you need 1100 XP to get your first chevron and 1400 XP to get your next 2. So I'll show you how this goes here. So we got our 1 chevron, so we're going to start the battle, and you'll see the difference. We did get to 1 chevron by the very end, but you know, we just barely got it. You'll see now here, it only requires 600 XP, and I'll get it almost instantly. I mean, I am killing their leader, but you'll see, really, it does come pretty fast. So I get that fight going there. I got 2 chevrons right now, just like that, bang. And I'm working my way towards getting 3. So those extra stats sort of kick in on my powerful units very, very quickly. So this is important, I think. Again, is it exploit? I mean, I don't know. It is how it is, and it's been like that way for a really long time. But yeah, so there we go. So now we've got 2 chevrons out of that. Now I'll show you the effect if you fight a higher level, a higher rank opponent. It's actually pretty easy to get to 3. So let's go to the Vampire Coast. We'll grab like a depth guard, and we can go and fight. You can see how fast my hammerers get from 1 chevron to 3 chevrons. So essentially, you're getting on your most powerful unit 6 free stat points, or 4 free stat points, whatever the case may be. You'll see how quickly we go. Now we got 2 chevrons, and we should get to 3 chevrons. Should be very close. If we kill their leader, we'll no, not quite. I've done this battle a few times, but it's actually quite easy to get to 3 chevrons. Now, when you fight like a very low level unit, you get experience a lot slower. So even though all units need the same amount of experience to get chevrons, you get experience from units at a different rate. So oftentimes you'll see in a normal battle, you get chevrons when you kill the enemy lord, or you do a lot of damage to the enemy lord. Well, if you start with your whole army with 1 chevron, you're essentially setting yourself up to get the maximum amount of free stat points during a battle. So I'm definitely going to try that myself. Anyways, I'll keep on moving on. That was a bit of an aside, but an important and valuable, I think, thing for anyone who sort of likes watching these crazy stat videos where we go over testing. Now you have a little toolkit in another tool in your toolkit for when you have a battle. Just start with 1 chevron on all your units, and you will maximize all your units will be a little more powerful to begin with, but you maximize the total number of free stats you can get during the battle. Is it the difference between a win or a loss? Well, probably not that much of a difference, but every little bit counts. It's like, you know, you might think that the saying I've heard is, you know, it's just a grain of sand, but you have enough grains of sand, eventually you have you know, like a beach. And this is sort of the idea, is this is one little bit of information, or not statistical, this is a game information in terms of how chevrons work and the value of chevrons. So I would say that very first chevron is actually quite valuable because that allows you to get to your second and third quite quickly, which can have some impact on the battle. Anyways, I did 20 tests of each, and I will go to sort of the bottom set of analysis that I did. Here we go. So I looked at, originally I said the standard deviation as you get closer to victory, like the very last set when I was at +9 chevrons, you know, I won 15% of the fights. I mean, if we could keep going, this would keep going up, but standard deviation, sure enough, it does go up, and it goes up more as we get closer. I think this would be a parabolic curve, just like the one that I drew, up until that 50% win-loss state, and then it would go back down again. But it's interesting that I still think that 20 battles is not enough to smooth this data out. I probably do need something like 100. I remember in my original video 3 years ago, I did 5 battles of each, and I said I probably need 20. Well, I've done 20. 20 is pretty decent, but it's still not there. You probably need 100. I'd imagine, to give you a good number. Now, here's something else very interesting that I learned in this, is that there's a key point where when two units are far apart, you actually have a stronger advantage than you might think, because of an effect that your unit won't fight to the death, so to speak, or fight till its lower level of hit points. Now, you can see this in the gold differential, where we were actually losing gold until we got to 5 chevrons, and then we started gaining it pretty rapidly. But it's linear, but it's pretty rapidly. And you see in the percentage health of the Saurus warriors that it looks linear right up until this 5 chevron points, and then it goes down. Like, it's definitely a change in that curve, in that data set, from 2 distinctly different lines. Now, what is happening there? And this effect is actually caused by when your unit gets close enough to the unit it's fighting, when it's losing, is that it lasts longer. Now, this is specifically for the dwarfs, because dwarfs have very good melee defense and dwarfs tend to last near the end. You start getting a lot of value here. So I'll show you in the data. You can see it most clearly if we look here at the percentage of health that the Saurus warriors finish with. So when we fought a dwarf warrior at 0 chevrons, they finished with 66%. And we finished with 20% of our health. We go to the next level, we finished with 19%. And this, like, we're kind of sort of 1100 hit points. The Saurus warriors finished with 64%. The next level, we're still at 19%. We finished with 1138. And they're at 62. So it's slowly coming down because of our stat differential. But we're still, the battle is ending at around 1100 hit HP for our dwarf warriors. And you go to the next level, we're still at 19%, 1100 HP. Now we're down to 61% for the Saurus warriors. And here's where you start seeing, okay, we're still at 19%, but we're going to start seeing some lower numbers, like 880 health we fought to. Still at 19%. Almost 1100, they're down to 59%. Yes, here's at 5 chevrons where you really start seeing this change. And that's where the dwarf warriors would fight down to 800 health, and even lower. They got down to 18% and 54% for the Saurus warriors. And this really accelerates fast as we get closer to being competitive in that fight. And you'll see the next one. We actually finished with 16% of our health. The Saurus warriors, 47%. You can see, so we fought them all the way down to 576 hit points here, 692, and we netted 920, and that really helped our units. So as your units become more competitive, you really have a sharp increase in your combat effectiveness. So there's sort of that tipping point where your unit's going to run away at 1100 HP because it's just, it's fighting such an uphill battle, to where it's getting close enough that your unit will hang in there. And you'll see as we get to 7 chevrons, we will go all the way down to 795 hit points, and 8 chevrons down to 664, and 9 chevrons 677, and we're starting to win some fights. We won 1 fight at 8 chevrons for 5% of the fights, and 3 for 15% at 9 chevrons. And that's this curve right here, the percent health for the Saurus warriors. It just kind of looks like a straight line. And generally, I don't think this would be maybe a perfectly straight line if you extrapolate far enough, but you can really see where this changes right at 5 chevrons. And that's because we're sort of in striking distance of actually being competitive, and our units hang in there a lot longer and continue to fight, and that's when they really start digging in. You see on the gold differential where you really start gaining value, really on a pretty steady way. So we're losing value and then we start gaining it. So that's sort of the set of tests and sort of the data. Now I'll go up to the original sort of, this is sort of that curve that I looked at. We didn't quite get to 50%, but you could see our standard deviation was getting a lot more swingy. The really this idea of finding this whole one chevron thing was a complete accident. I mean, lots of these happen when you do tests, like you find something you never expected to see. But it is quite interesting that when you look at the actual value of these chevrons, there's sort of sweet spots, and I have talked about this before, sweet spots for the chevrons when you're looking at very, very specific matchups. And I know most people don't look at really in depth in the matchups, and that's something that I think I'm the only one I've ever seen do this sort of work online, is that I look at really what matchups, what chevron levels actually matter in certain matchups. And you know, that's where I've looked at longbeards, and you know, there's a 1 chevron is very good, and 4 chevrons happens to be a very good chevron level for fighting lizardmen and the Saurus warriors with shields. Now it's a little bit changed because these guys got a bit of a buff, but you know, at this level, you know, you go from losing when you have no chevrons to winning, which really sort of matters in the end. Now, as to the total value of chevrons, there's different ways to look at this. Now, I've only looked at this curve coming up. I did do a set of tests trying to look at this part of the curve, but it didn't quite work out because I didn't pick the right units to test. Like, what did I test? I did a whole bunch of tests against clan rats, and the data sort of didn't work out, and I only did 7 tests. And you know, I still did a whole bunch of testing, but it sort of worked, but I was like sort of on this part of the curve where I really want to be on this part, sort of on this part of the curve, where I want to really understand that part. So I might do another set of tests to take a look at that part of the curve, because really what we looked at in this set of tests is this part of the curve for the interaction between the dwarf warriors and the Saurus warriors. Now, interestingly enough, longbeards, just a base longbeard at 650, does pull better value than a dwarf warrior with 9 chevrons. Even though the dwarf warrior does have 2 extra stat points, the longbeards have extra health, which really matters, and extra armor. So, you know, you're better off having a longbeard at 650 than a dwarf warrior with 9 chevrons, for sure. Now, this isn't going to be the case for every single faction, because every single faction doesn't have units that fit together so nicely, like dwarf warriors, longbeards, and ironbreakers for the dwarfs. But really, I think, you know, looking at this, dwarf warriors, I think it's a no-brainer to give anything 1 chevron. And there are some real sweet spots depending on the matchup and the units you expect to see. And those are sort of a something that I've talked about before, something that I've done analysis when I've looked at different factions as to where the best place to set your chevrons are in that specific matchup. So really, the summary of the video is where your chevrons are at matters more than just the matchup, but also this weird little experience thing. What a difference that makes is doing that right. Like, you're essentially getting free stats. Like, I don't think I mean, I have to go and redo all my armies because I'd want to make sure really any unit that's kind of that, well, probably all of my units, but for sure anytime I have a hammer or an ironbreaker or a giant slayer or a slayer or longbeards with great weapons, or really, you're getting free stats. Because you look at those hammers, you know, their first stat point costs 42. The next one, yeah, you're getting to go from 1 chevron to 2. You get 3 stat points, so you're getting almost 3 stat points for free. Because your hammers, unless they get charged down by cavalry or something goofy like that, or beat up by artillery or magic, you know, they're going to get to that. They're going to get 600 experience in a battle every single fight because they kill things pretty quickly. So you're essentially, by starting them at 1 chevron, you're going to get an extra chevron for free, or 3 stat points for free, and you give yourself a chance to get to 3 chevrons very, very easily. So I would definitely encourage you to try that with any army, really. I would say all units, but more so on expensive units, because of this weird effect where even though more expensive units give more XP to units they're fighting, all units require the exact same experience to move up ranks during a fight, which is a little strange. Who knows? Maybe it'll stay like that forever. I don't know how long it's been like that, to be honest. Maybe it's been like that since the day one in the game. But it is actually a very useful little technique, and I'm going to put it to use. And I would love to, you know, if you know, I always ask for comments. I love comments, and it's one of my favorite things about doing this is getting comments. I would love to hear from you if you put this to use in any fight, if you see the difference. And it would be very curious to say, you know, you pick your whole army and you give your whole army 1 chevron, how the fights go in terms of how many free chevrons you get. Like, where, you know, because a lot of fights, you know, you might have 1 or 2 units pick up a chevron during the fight. Would it be possible for half of your units to pick up a chevron during the fight if you're using this? I think it would be. And a more than 1 unit picking up multiple chevrons, because if you start at 1, you only need 1400 XP to get 2 extra chevrons. So I would love to hear from you in the comments if you give this a try and you find it to be useful. Really curious about that. And definitely the stats. I mean, I have a whole series of the value of chevrons, and I will continue to sort of study this effect because I find it highly interesting, and you know, it's some kind of testing that I certainly enjoy doing, and looking at sort of the way the data lays out. I hope those of you that really like looking at standard deviation and sort of deeper statistical analysis can appreciate that I put the standard deviation in there, because you can do you can get a ton of numbers. All they need is standard deviation and a formula, and maybe 1 or 2 other numbers, and you get a lot of data off of that very easily. So having that standard deviation calculation readily available is useful. Now, putting it on the goal differential, that's my choice. You know, that's the number that I like to see, because I feel the goal differential is the #1 sort of thing for me. Now, time is another very important aspect, and you know, when I evaluated all the units differentially, when I looked at the, you know, the total value of units between 900 and 1 gold and up, I did value time as higher. But me personally, I do like just the value of the gold as more important. I mean, that's my dwarf blood requiring me to think about the gold. Think about the gold, man. Anyways, that's my video. Looking forward to comments down below. Hope you found it interesting, and I will see you soon.